Y'all have been loving Street Fighter V stuff, so here's one more. I've talked about strong characters before, and I've even talked about strong characters in Street Fighter V before. And one of the characters that usually come up in the conversation about 5 is Luke. Luke came out as the final character and was very strong. Large buttons, solid damage, a recharging V-trigger. Luke had a lot of things going for him. And the common consensus is that Luke was the best character in the game once the game stopped getting updated. And that's a perfectly valid opinion to have. If someone claimed that, I wouldn't be confused, surprised, or upset. Luke does have a very good case for strongest. But I'm here to say that Luke isn't the best. He's only the second best. I'm here to make the case for top 1 Dhalsim. And this isn't me giving a scalding take, a little hot. Here's Phenom's tier list. This wasn't a popular opinion, but it did exist. I'm not crazy. Dhalsim is a really strong character. So let's dive into what makes him so good, from the expected to the less expected. Sim is a zoner. He's one of the quintessential zoners of the entire genre, him and Guile. So it would make sense for his strengths to be in his zoning tools, in the options he has to play at full screen, to keep out your opponent, forcing them to make their way in. So while Guile has his sonic booms, his fireball, Sim's primary tool for this is his stretchy limbs. His buttons are very long, go full screen, and are unpunishable on block, as long as you're not point blank. Not big combo potential off of them, but he can threaten lows, and most characters don't have anything to do at the range where he can press these. You can still whiff punish these, but that's about it. And while Sim's zoning doesn't focus on his fireball, he still has one. His fireball's not a traditional one, it arcs up, meaning it's more there to stop air approaches or as a delayed pressure tool. It's good as its own tool and certainly usable, but when he spends an EX bar he gets this. EX Fireball, which I think is the second best EX move in the game. Slow-moving, multi-hit fireball that guarantees lots of plus frames. And here we begin to depart from his zoner tools and get into the things that make this move so good. Dhalsim has some really good movement tools. He may have the worst walk speed in the game, it's one of his most defined weaknesses, along with his low life and stun, but he is in no way immobile. He can float in the air, and he can teleport. Teleport gives Sim so many options. An additional way to navigate the neutral, a way to push offense after a knockdown, a way to feint an air approach, and a way to generate advantage off of your EX Fireball. Spit out a fireball, then either dash in for your turn, or teleport in for not only a turn, but mix. If your opponent responds, just sit there and stop their counterplay. Even with his zoning tools, he still has a way to get in and push offense. A luxury for a zoner, but not completely unexpected. So yes, Sim is a zoner with zoner tools, and they're pretty good. Dhalsim zoning good is expected, and is consistent across his iterations. Probably. But what makes him top 1 isn't his zoning, it's everything else that he just so happens to also have. First off, he has surprisingly good damage. Even when not in the corner, Sim hits much harder than you would expect a zoner would. That's nice, but what really makes Sim so scary is his offensive pressure. This guy has so many ways of stealing his turn back. He has Drill, the best dive kick in the game, which we'll get to later. He has Heavy Gale, which he can sneak in for plus frames, and he has Air Gale, the second best dive kick in the game, which he can also sneak in for plus frames. Once he gets in, you need to take initiative on your defense or he'll just stay in. These moves do have gaps, but it's still a big challenge to deal with. It is a bit crazy that a zoner has such smothering offense. But it's not just his plus frames. Because of his float, he gets inherent access to high-low mix. And because of his float and teleports, he also gets inherent access to left-right mix. Sim doesn't rely on the mix-ups like some characters, but he does have access to it, and it makes his offense even trickier. He also has the Street Fighter VI Eternal Oki. Slide and teleport mean he will keep advantage after his hits. Dhalsim has some tremendous offense. But shouldn't all that be fine because he's a zoner, right? He doesn't have a good way of getting in. Strong offense doesn't mean much if you don't have a way of accessing it. And if you're a zoner, you probably don't have something like that, right? Or at least you need to spend bar to get it, right? We already talked about how EX Fireball's gross and it gives him a free turn. But I want to go a bit back and bring up another tool he has that makes him really strong. I just talked about how Drill is the best dive kick in the game. So, Drill is the best dive kick in the game. 3 different angles, all of them with the potential to be plus if spaced properly at all. It's more likely for this to whiff than be punishable. This is really good, and it means that once you get into around this range, you have to be wary of him getting in from the skies and taking his turn. And because it comes in so fast and at this angle, the way you anti-air this is with Stand Light Punch. meaning this dive kick is really risk averse. Did it work? Great, you're in start abusing plus frames. It didn't work? It's fine, you take very little damage. But he can't dive kick at you from anywhere, so just walk out of the range, right? After all, Sim has abysmal walk speed. But once you do, now you're at threat of his zoning limbs. It's a lose-lose situation. Wherever you are on the screen, Sim has the ability to push his game plan, whether that's keeping you out or getting in himself. But even with all this, Sim should theoretically struggle once he's on the back foot and his opponent is in his face. Which is to say, no invincible reversal, weak defense. Meaning, even with all his strengths and keeping you out, once you do get in on him, he falls apart, right? Here's the thing. Dhalsim doesn't have an invincible reversal, that much is true. But he doesn't have an atrocious defense either. It seems like his tools never run out. Sim has a lot of air options, his floats and his dive kick and his air gale, all of which are throw invulnerable because he's in the air, which means he has anti-throw inherently built into his kit. Escapes the throw and steals back the turn. Still is risky because you could be put in counter hit state, but it is good enough to be a defensive option Sim could threaten. Not very common though because this wasn't a very throw heavy game. And he has the universal V reversal as well, spending 1 bar for a get off of me tool.
Come on, get off me!
But when the final season came out, it also came out with a new universal mechanic. The universal defensive option, the V shift. Spend a bar and do this cool dodge past their strike with the opportunity to V break, and knock them back just like the reversal. But the difference is that you can V shift on wake up, and a successful shift gives you half a bar back, even better for your economy. It's also another anti-fireball tool in case your character didn't have one, but that's neither here or there. But it gave Sim a strong anti-strike tool that made his defense better. Did it make everyone else's defense better too? Yes, it did. But having the defense floor raised definitely helped Sim more than the others. His teleport was also great in his defense, no 3-frame light, but the teleport means any mash button can lead to him getting the corner for himself. Don't get me wrong, Dhalsim does not have good defense. No reversal means a lot, but he doesn't have nothing, and V-Shift shored up his defense enough so that he wouldn't just get abused. Combining it with his V-Reversal, the once-in-a-blue-moon anti-throw option, along with his ability to take the corner with his teleport, Sim would not just fall apart once he got pounced on. And now a couple of other strengths that didn't fit in the previous talking points. Dhalsim's V-Trigger 1 is really good. It's not Tengu Stones or Aegis, but for a 2-bar trigger, it's really good. Guaranteed Grey Life on block, and not an insignificant amount either. And because Dhalsim is Dhalsim, he can make sure that that Grey Life will not recover, and that damage is all but guaranteed. For a character that is mainly using their V-Gauge for defensive purposes, he has a V-Trigger that is not only accessible because of 2-bar, but is still really good. He also has surprisingly good anti-fireball, the slide is real good, and he can float, and he can just heavy punch from full screen. And also, the art is really dumb. Jump back instant light punch gives you an unreactable overhead from way too far away. And because he can also do an unreactable low, once you're hit away from losing, you gotta play very well to make it out. So that's why Dhalsim is good. But now let me make the argument for why he's better than Luke. I've already talked about a way to rank character strength in a previous video, but that way was a bit more broad. So let's narrow it down for this comparison and for more specific placings. To begin, have a rough estimate of where everyone is, at least have them in the tier that they should roughly be around. Then for the individual character you want to place, calculate each of the individual matchups that character has with the entire cast. Being 4-6, 5-5, 6-4, that's what I mean. Then you take the matchups with anything below 5-5 being considered negative, and weigh those with their initial rough tier placing, with more weight being placed on higher tiers. And use that number to place them in their individual rank, the highest number being the best character. Full disclosure, I'm not going to give the weighing multipliers because it's certainly a case-to-case basis, and I definitely didn't do the exact calculations for these two characters. I'm just using this as a basis to explain why I think Sim is better. And if you look at them through this lens, Sim's good matchups are more in favor of him than Luke's good matchups are. Sim's bad matchups are also worse. I don't think Luke loses as hard to Sim or Urian, but Luke's good matchups aren't that heavily in his favor. Luke's kit isn't the most conducive to smothering his opponent. Comes down to 2 points. Sim's good matchups are better, and to a lesser degree, Sim wins the head-to-head. I'm just stealing from Brady.
Skibbity.
This kid.
But I will admit that the margin is pretty thin. I'm sure if the calculations were done, the difference would be small. Luke is still very good. So if this character is so strong, stronger than Luke, then why don't people really play him at top level? At the end of the game, there were only really 3 Dhalsim players that were at that top level of competition. Mr. Crimson, obviously, then a bit of a gap, and the 2 Japanese players, Torameshi and YHC Mochi. Pretty small compared to the abundance of players who picked up Luke. Like the bull. The first reason is that Luke is still very good. He's very consistent, he's also very straightforward in his game plan, so it just makes sense to play Luke. In contrast, Dhalsim is much harder to execute. You have a lot of very strong options, but they're all for very specific scenarios, and you need to make sure you're picking the right one for the right situation. It's a lot more on your mind when you have 13 different anti-airs that you'll be using 11 of over the course of a round. This is a bit of hyperbole, but I think you get my point. And sometimes you can't even anti-air. It's the whole crutch of the Rashid matchup. And Sim being a zoner with worse defense does make him inherently volatile. His tools do mitigate this issue a lot, but you still have to deal with more volatility than Luke, especially if you're entering an open bracket. Dhalsim takes a lot of time and effort to pick up. You can even argue that this is a character you need to put all your time into. You can't pick him up as a secondary. So if you have a character that is hard to play, slightly more volatile, and only a bit better than someone like Luke, it makes sense that he isn't that popular. And again, it's not like he wasn't played at all. Crimson was putting up great results. Sim may not be the best by much, but I still think he's the best. It also doesn't help that in the grand scheme of things, we really didn't have a lot of time for this meta to develop, which does impact the characters that are played at high level. I won't pretend that metagames can't develop after most of the player base have moved on, but it slows down to a crawl, and I think Street Fighter specifically have people move on to the current game because it's the one being supported by Capcom. It just makes sense. But here's a hot take to end with. If the game got another couple years of active competition and development, another character could have been the best in the game. I think Cody had potential to be the best character. Maybe. Poison matchup is still rough though. But that's for another time. That's all the Street Fighter V stuff I've got in the tank. Not saying there won't be more, but topics would be cool too. If y'all give ideas, that'd be very nice.